Hello and welcome. This is our pre-budget debate, our pre-budget special. Technically, it's 1 year and 3 months or a little bit more to the next general election. If you look at it non-technically, purely politically, or in terms of possibilities, they say the election could happen anywhere after 3 months. So it's going to be a very open-ended situation right now. And when in this kind of an open-ended situation, the finance minister stands up to present the budget, the possibilities are endless. To take us through the various possibilities, put them in the correct macroeconomic and political perspective, our editor politics and editor economy. With me in the studio, Navika, thanks. She's with us in Mumbai. And joining us from locations outside, from Delhi, we have Bibek Debroy, noted economist, consulting editor of the Economic Times, Swaminathan Iyer, Dr. Omkar Goswami of SERG Advisory, also one of the most respected voices on the Indian macroeconomic situation, and Lord Meghnad Desai is joining us from our studios in Westminster in London. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Let's open the floor up, Navika. My first question to you is, as you take us through the questions going forward, is when we look at a budget that's going to happen in this kind of a politically charged environment, you wear two hats, Navika. You wear the hat of editor politics, you're also the editor economy. Which hat would you put up first when you look at a situation such as this?
Well, Arnav, there's only one way at looking at budgets in India, and that's the political economy of the budget. The political economy is something even more pronounced in a pre-election year, and especially at a time like this, it's also the man in the hot seat, P. Chidambaram. How's he going to look at the budget? Of course, elections are around the corner, whichever way you look at it. It is May 2014, which is the real time, but many people expecting it to happen sometime around the end of 2013. So will this be the last budget before elections? That's the big picture in which Chidambaram will stand up to present his budget on the 28th of February. And what he's going to be looking at is, he's a stickler for numbers. He's going to be looking over his shoulder at the credit rating agencies, which are looking at the galloping expenditure and the rising fiscal deficit. But he's also going to be looking at what he can give to the Aam Aadmi, to the middle classes, who he really needs to woo in a pre-election year. And he's also going to look at issues that will need to spur up the growth of the economy, something that's a big worry for both the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister.
So let's take up the questions then. My first question to our panel, and we'll follow the debate format. I'd like to go to Lord Meghnad Desai, because he's the farthest, not mentally from us, but physically on this show. Lord Desai, let's put the numbers out. Will he focus on fiscal correction? Does he have the luxury of trying to control the fiscal deficit with the food security bill, and Narega and other expenses getting precedence? Do you think he can manage the deficit?
Well, I think he can only manage a deficit if he cuts out a lot of non-planned expenditure. There are noises that he is going to do that, but unless he promises to cut the deficit seriously, the Reserve Bank of India will not lower interest rates. And if the RBI does not lower interest rate, the middle classes will not feel better off because they're suffering from inflation. So his dilemma is, does he go for reduction of deficit and relieve the middle classes, or does he give away a big bonanza of subsidies and wrecks the deficit and hopes that that will get him the good points from the Congress leadership? So I think it's a difficult job Chidambaram faces, and I hope that he goes for the deficit cutting.
What do you think, Swami?
I am very clear. It is not difficult to cut the fiscal deficit, provided two things happen. First, you need to re-energize GDP growth. If GDP growth goes up from 5% this year to 6.5% next year, that gives you a very considerable amount of additional revenue. So a focus on growth and getting down the fiscal deficit come to the same thing. Second, the deregulation we are getting of diesel. Well, if you look at that trend, I think that could save you 40,000 crores next year compared with this year. That again is a substantial decrease and does help you meet your fiscal target of 4.8%. I think I want to add that the most important thing in an election year is that inflation must be brought under control.
Yes.
For inflation to be brought under control, Chidambaram is very clear, we must avoid a credit downgrade by the international rating agencies. If they downgrade us, money flows out of India, the rupee crashes from 55 to 60 to the rupee, all import prices go up, and inflation hits 15%. The biggest disaster for politically would be a downgrade. So I think it's a rare case, this particular budget, that what the Aam Aadmi wants, which is a taming of inflation, and what the international rating agencies and investors want, which is, once again, a return to a normal path, which would then enable inflation to come down, which would enable interest rates to come down. I think there is a convergence between what the Aam Aadmi would want and what the international investors want. That's what he is going to go for. The over and above that, I mean, in every budget, finance minister makes sure there is no vote bank left behind. So much for scheduled castes, so much for scheduled tribes, the special dispensation for Muslims, this for a backward region. It's quite easy to give a large number of small little fiddling things to different places. And it's possible to do a lot of that via the banking system. So that while he appears to be doing a lot, the money doesn't necessarily come out of the budget, but comes out of the banking system. So I think, is going to be the overall thrust. Get the fiscal deficit down. The important part of it is going to be you regenerate foreign confidence, investor confidence, and you get the growth.
Right.
Because of that, the rupee strengthens, inflation comes down.
Right. Let me also draw in Omkar Goswami at this stage. Omkar, we're looking at Chidambaram addressing the credit rating agencies, also addressing the own FRBM Act, the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act that he himself had notified in 2005. But we're also looking at Chidambaram providing for a food security bill, subsidies and other dominant parts of the budget remaining where they are, because 56% of the budget really goes towards pensions, subsidies, interest payments. How is Chidambaram likely to juggle all this around?
Well, here's my take on him. In his last stint as finance minister, he had brought down the fiscal deficit and at the end of it quite honestly stated fiscal deficits to 2.6% of GDP. It seems like proto-history, given how his successor increased it in 3 years. But I think Chidambaram is very much focused and has always been focused on bringing the fiscal deficit down, and he has very good arguments about it, that if the government spends significantly more than what it earns, it crowds out investment opportunities, it crowds out private sector investment, it crowds out infrastructure, and it doesn't allow for capital building. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm sure of the fact that he will try very hard for the year that is coming to an end to keep it to about 5.3% of GDP, as he has said.
Yeah, but
I think he's going to also come up with some pretty good proposals, I think, to keep it down to 4.8 in the next year. As far as the food security bill is concerned, Navika, it is overstated. Even though it's election year, it's not going to cost more than 5,000, 6,000 crore for the next year. It'll be much higher the year after, but for the next year, it's not going to be much more than 7,000, 8,000.
No, but what's the political bonus? Chidambaram had always
budgets do not cause political bonus.
But there has to be one this year.
You have to, no, budgets don't. I have not heard of a budget that has won anyone seats. I have heard of budgets that have lost seats, but not budgets that have won seats.
No, what about, for example, no, I get your point, but what about, for example, Bibek Debroy, the farm loan waiver, 2008, there was farm loan waiver 1, you can't have farm loan waiver 2 this time, but it's again a pre-election year, and so was 2008.
Well, I have sort of 4 points to make before I answer that question. The first one is the budget is only one particular instrument. So we cannot expect the budget to address issues of either slowdown in growth or inflation. These are things that need to be addressed outside the budget, and unfortunately I think this present government has left it too late. The second point is that I disagree a little bit with Navika that Mr. Chidambaram may be a stickler for numbers, but he is not always necessarily honest about the numbers. One example of that was in the year 2008. I hope this time, particularly because the fiscal deficit is going to be so scrutinized, that he is going to be a bit more honest about the numbers and is not going to resort to statistical jugglery. The third point I want to make is particularly because of the external credit rating agencies, I think it's extremely important that he's going to stick to the 4.8% target. Where I disagree a little bit with Dr. Desai is that I don't think he's going to do that by slashing non-plan expenditure. He's going to do that by slashing plan expenditure. And we can debate whether that's desirable or not, but that's essentially what he's going to do, slash the plan expenditure. And I hope he does not overestimate nominal GDP growth, as Swami mentioned, or overestimate revenue and underestimate expenditure. I quite agree with Omkar that I don't think the food subsidy issue is an important one for this budget. In fact, I won't be very surprised if he doesn't budget at all. On Arnab's question, it's not a question of whether something actually delivers votes or not. But the fact of the matter is that incorrectly, in my view, the present dispensation thought that the farm loan waiver, the MGNR EGS, it paid electoral dividends, and therefore in this time round also the food subsidy bill, which as I said will not be budgeted for, but that food subsidy bill will be perceived to yield electoral dividends.
Taxing the rich. My next question. It has a popular ring to it. It's being spoken about repeatedly. I don't know why, but will Chidambaram actually take that chance? Meghnad Desai, what do you think?
Well, I think there is no harm in trying. I hope the rich are clever enough to evade taxes, as they always do. But I think there is no doubt that Indian tax system is not progressive enough. And there is a general resentment that a lot of subsidies are being given to the rich and not matching enough for the poor. So I think, but he will have to find a clever way of taxing the rich.
Well, why are they talking about
it? Unless it is effective, it will only be
Why are they talking about it? Now, I don't. Can someone explain to me, as a layman, why is there so much talk on taxing the rich? Only because, it seems good to take this kind of a position in a pre-election year, to be punishing the rich. It has this sort of ringtone to it.
See, when people criticize subsidies for the poor, the answer is, well, the rich get a lot of subsidies as well. And so why are you complaining? So in answer to that, you said, no, we're going to tax the rich a little bit so that we can cut subsidies a little bit.
Yeah, sure, but will he do it, is my question.
That is the argument.
Will he really do it, is my question. Swami?
No, I don't think so. Arnab,
he won't do it.
Arnab, I want to come in on this.
Yeah.
Sorry, I want to come in on this. I don't think so. We're not talking about whether he should or he shouldn't.
Will he?
I don't think he's going to do it because through the whole of the next year, he needs the international capital markets to rate India well. He needs the stock market prices to remain high. He will have to next year. This year he has had to get 30,000 crores on disinvestment. Next year he'll probably have to get 45 to 50,000 crores out on disinvestment. He cannot spook the markets. So however much he might wish to do it, and however much some economists will feel that that is a good progressive tax, I would be very
unhappy to.
I don't think he's going to do it. And I think he'll be quite silly to do it this year when he wants the markets the way he wants them.
Swami, there's the other question of, on the tax front, Swami, there's the other question of the fact that tax disputes have gone up and we are paying interest on tax disputed amounts to the tune of about 37,000 crore. Now, the Vodafone issue or taxing the super rich or the corporates, that's been in a major area of worry, and taxes this year have not been collected at the rate that the finance minister would have wanted them to be collected. So in this backdrop, how do you see him behaving on the tax front?
As far as the there are large, I think about 50,000 or crores is tied up just in transfer pricing disputes and about 300,000 crores in all the other disputes. If you can have some kind of dispute settlement mechanism which is nice and clean, frankly, out of that a whole lot can come in. Now that is at the technical level, and
It'll
that
take
will
time.
certainly help him bring down the fiscal deficit. Over and above that, the real problem I think is that from last year they started saying that, you know, multinationals indulge in transfer pricing on goods and services, we have to check that, fine. But somehow now they brought capital transactions into that. And we have a situation where Shell was slapped with a demand of 15,000 crores for the issue of fresh shares. Issue of fresh shares nowhere in the world is regarded as income. So, you know, something is going wrong where we appear to be taxing FDI. I think Chidambaram would need to get up and make it very clear that, look, transfer pricing we will tax if we find that, you know, there is misuse, but we are not going to tax capital inflows. If he makes this kind of message clear, I think he can ensure that a certain amount of money comes in. And meanwhile, if he wants to raise some more money out of the rich, I mean, please remember that Jaswant Singh back in 2003 put a 10% surcharge on income tax, incomes above 8.5 lakhs, and that actually was given up, I think, only about 3 or 4 years ago. So Chidambaram can certainly say, as Mr. Jaswant Singh has brought in this particular thing, I would also like to bring in this 10% surcharge. It would be temporary on high incomes, and in due course it will go away. I think that way you can get a certain amount of income without spooking the market.
No, Navika, I want to say something quite clearly. That the issue is not about taxing the rich more. The issue is about collecting. We have a system where the number of people declaring taxable income of 10 lakhs or more is pitiable, it's shameful, and everybody knows that that number is so small that it's a palpable hoax on the tax system.
Yeah.
There is no reason why you cannot double the number of people on the upper end of the tax system who are avoiding taxes. And PC has done this before, he tried to do this before. You try and figure out through the budget, make strong statements about revenue collection, about tax collection, about better tax administration, and get the guy who is going around with a big car using diesel and not paying tax to pay tax, instead of increasing the tax rate of those who pay tax.
Yeah, but my bigger question is, which we haven't really come to yet. I want to spend a couple of minutes on it before I go into my first break is, you know, this is, gentlemen, we are looking at it through an economic lens. The government has to in a pre-election year. My premise is this government, where whatever Chidambaram may want to do, whatever the credit rating agencies, Meghnad Desai may want, he is going to have to loosen his purse strings for large sops. We are not talking about that. At least there has to be an impression of large sops, irrespective of what, you know, Fitch or S&P are going to tell us.
Well, you know, the problem is that if he does that, and there'll be great temptation to do that from the left wing of the Congress party, inflation will not come down.
But he's going to do
Interest
that.
rates will not come down.
But he's going to have to do
The
that.
choice is very simple.
No, in
do
today's-
you want the urban vote? Do you want the urban vote, or you don't want the urban vote?
No, what about the rural
You lose
vote?
the urban vote.
No, what about the vote which actually the Congress party today still believes, whether you like it or not, Swami, the Congress party believes that SOPs and subsidies are vote-fetching instruments. This is the crude reality of it.
And that was the major theme that was presented to Chidambaram when he went to the Congress
To the Congress
headquarters, AICC 24 Akbar Road, just a few days ago. That was the overwhelming demand from all congressmen, saying that this is a pre-election year, so don't look at the purse strings. Go ahead and announce
Want
something.
the rural vote anywhere.
Quite right. So, Navika, here's my simple thing. There are hundreds of things I can do behaving as if I am increasing expenditure when in fact I need not spend the money. Let's be very realistic. A large amount of non-plan expenditure can be announced with grand schemes, with many new Rajiv Gandhi schemes, many new Indira Gandhi schemes, many new Mahatma Gandhi schemes, which will not be spent over the second half of the year. So you can get all your kudos for doing it and you won't have to spend cash.
But that will have an
very
adverse
important
impact
thing
on the
to note-
deficit, on the fiscal deficit, and
Not
that's where
at
the
all,
credit
not
rating
at
agencies
all.
are looking
People-
at you.
No. People will actually see halfway down. People will see halfway down the fiscal year how the accounts have worked out. So if Mr. Chidambaram wants to, as is expected, keep the Congress party happy and keep his leadership happy, he can announce some SOPs. The fact of the matter is not even 25 to 30% of those SOPs will actually be spent.
But in a pre-election year, I'm sorry, but the lay logic would be that in a pre-election year, you're looking for SOPs which can be felt, which can reach, which can have impact. I don't think that the Congress party is naive enough to think that the Indian voter will vote because something has been announced and sometime in the future, Swami, it will come into effect.
Arnab, if I may come in, there are two big issues. One is the Aadhaar scheme. There is going to be the direct benefits transfer scheme, which is going to be tom-tommed. In this particular thing, you don't necessarily have to put more money out. If the same amount of money is put out more efficiently and actually reaches the beneficiary, that is a very major benefit and a vote catcher. Not only that, some of the pilot projects have shown that there are a large number of ghost cards, non-existent people getting benefits right now. If through the Aadhaar biometrics, you say, where are the fingerprints, where are the irises, if you don't have those, you don't get those cash benefits. In other words, you can actually have a direct cash benefit system which benefits the real beneficiaries and yet saves you money by cutting out all those ghost entries. So this is one thing which can actually produce a large number of beneficiaries, potential voters, without necessarily costing a lot of money. Secondly, I said the food security bill will be passed. There will be some kind of impact in some places. And third, this point that Omkar was making and me, a very large number of schemes are often announced which take the form of an additional amount of loans here, additional amount of loans there. It can be done through the banking system. It does not necessarily mean large sums out of the budget. So I said the two big programs would be direct cash transfer, food security. Then there will be a large number of these small little schemes, one for each vote bank. But please, the biggest single measure is going to be bringing down inflation. That is going to be the one that has the major impact. Bringing down inflation happily coexists, therefore, with bringing down the fiscal deficit, attracting foreign money, avoiding a credit.
The options are very limited. I'm going to take a short break. When we come back, you have an economist prime minister looking at all this. Will he throw caution to the winds and take a big political gamble in a pre-election year? Everyone in the Congress party would be cheering him on if he does that. How much resistance will there be from the ruling party to Chidambaram? How much is there already? We'll talk about that on the other side. Welcome back to part 2 of our budget debate. Several questions do emerge. One of our questions which emerges is, if Chidambaram reduces expenditure to control fiscal deficit, will he be able to balance the plateauing growth? However, there is another question, Bibek Debroy, which I'd like to begin by asking you. We've been hearing this, that all critical ministries, right, Navika, will have their budgets cut. We heard this about defense, we heard about rural development. I think Jairam Ramesh has been cribbing openly about it. He wrote a letter. Even the atomic energy department, we are hearing it's going to be cut.
Not only that, the biggest problem is infrastructure sector, the Ministry of Roads and Highways. If budgets are cut in highways, in railways, do you think this is going to be counterproductive in the budget, which is looking at, spurring growth at the same time as looking at keeping a cap on expenditure, big-scale expenditure?
Well, before I respond to that, can I quickly make a few points about what was being talked about earlier about taxing the rich? On taxing the rich, firstly, there is a little bit that's symbolic in nature. And I'm certain one is going to have things like an inheritance tax. I don't think he'd actually want to increase the rates. He will probably have something like a surcharge, but the point about a surcharge is that a surcharge, unlike a rate hike, does not bring in that much of extra revenue. What he may, however, do, and I'm certain he's going to do that because it has major revenue implications, is to increase the excise duty rate for certain items that are perceived to be items of elitist consumption. Coming back to the question that was asked, and this is really the key, that the way he is going to manage the numbers and have those Sops and increase non-plan expenditure and stick to the deficit numbers is by slashing plan expenditure dramatically. And by slashing plan expenditure, he will be able to save at least 50,000 crores, which will be used for these Sops. Is it desirable? Of course it's not desirable, but that's the only way he can honestly stick to that fiscal deficit target of 4.8%.
Is that good for the country? Meghnad Desai, they know that you're cutting your defense budget, you're going to delay your acquisitions of howitzer guns, anti-tank missiles, you're going to cut down on the rural employment ministry. Is that desirable for a country at this stage of growth? Let's look at the bigger story.
But, I think we should stop thinking that all government expenditure is a good thing or that it is a growth-enhancing thing, because what we ought to measure are outcomes and not inputs. So I think there is no proof that the government of India spends money efficiently and that it enhances growth. Growth is not coming from the government expenditure. Growth comes from private investment. And what the government has done, it has wrecked household savings, it has wrecked private investment, and about time it's really cut.
No, but Meghnad Desai, I'd like to
make room for growth enhancing.
No, but for example, Swami, we are hearing that there was a target of 9,000 kilometers of roads in this fiscal. And the figures that we have is because of so many constraints, only 1,000 kilometers, I think, have actually been awarded contracts for. I don't know whether the National Highway Authority is plain inefficient or whether it's because of budgetary constraints, but I absolutely do know, Swami, that one of the reasons is budgetary constraints. Now, that's not bad expenditure. Meghnad Desai, no, you don't think
NHAI.
so? Okay. Okay,
no,
go ahead.
No, not NHAI. NHAI has not had money. It's not a situation of NHAI not having money because of budgetary constraints. Not at all. Not at all.
Exactly.
Well, we have been... Watch. Hasn't the ministry been told to look out for funds, from the National Highway Authority, partly funded by market borrowing? Isn't there a budget constraint that we're constantly told that there are budget constraints? Officials there tell us that there are budget constraints and these will only get worse.
NHAI is funded.
No, as an example.
Let me explain how NHAI is funded.
As an example. No, I don't want to get into NHAI.
It's important. No, it's important.
Yeah, let's be okay.
Because you talked of highways. Highways, if they are funded through NHAI, is usually done as what is called a PPP scheme, where there's a private-public partnership. A stretch of highway is bid out to the best bidder, and that person pays a price and over time gets an annuity from NHAI. They don't get it one shot. The basic reason why the number of highways has fallen, the number of bids had fallen, it's picked up again a little bit, was for 4 years NHAI did not have a chairman. And no files could be signed, as you know, and for the first UPA government, no files.
Okay, no, but let's not get
the reason for highways.
Okay, so you see, that may not be the only reason. Some people, officials say it's one of the reasons. My larger point, one minute, gentlemen. Larger point is, it's not only roads, it's going to be the Atomic Energy Department, it's going to be defense, it's going to be Rural Development Ministry. So will there be a cascading effect? There will not be a cascading effect, Swami. It will not have overall impact.
Arnab, if I may come in, I will argue strongly that while no doubt some squeeze is being put on planned spending in this fiscal year, I will bet anything that in the coming fiscal year, Chidambaram is going to show a significant increase in spending. It is not going to be an austerity budget where everything is slashed. The main thrust is going to be, look, this year we only had 5% GDP growth, so I didn't have revenue, I didn't have the money to spend. Next year I'm going to have 6.5% GDP growth.
Yeah.
That is going to give me much more
so they're
revenue,
looking to last.
and that will then allow me to spend much more.
Yeah.
So I'm willing to bet that the budget is not going to be an austerity budget.
Yeah.
The budget is going to be one which shows because of all the good things I'm doing outside the budget, including the railway, increase in railway fares, deregulation of oil, FDI in retail, enthusing foreign investment, Indian investment, I'm going to get growth. That growth is going to give me more than enough revenue, both to bring down my fiscal deficit to 4.8% of GDP and to have an increase in a number of planned spending schemes and some populist schemes.
So is next year
Believe
going...
me, it can be done. I mean, just the decontrol of oil. If your under recoveries fall from 180,000 crores, next year you only have to provide 30-40,000 crores for under recoveries. More than 100,000 crores, you are getting a saving simply on the oil deregulation.
Got it.
Vivek.
So, oil deregulation plus growth gives you lots of money to have the best of both worlds. You can both have a fall in the budget deficit to 4.8% of GDP and a rise in planned spending and some money for some of the goodies like the Food Securities Act.
So, you know,
Vivek Debroy, the real question is also about the budget having something for investments. We've seen the growth, and growth investments, that's the area that Chidambaram has to look at, also because we have a 10 million workforce which is added every year to the population. So investment issues are issues that Chidambaram will need to address along with the expenditure as well as the growth issues.
Yes, but I don't think the budget is going to solve that. The reason investments have flagged is partly the deficit, but more importantly, in my view, it is problems connected with land acquisition, problems connected with forest clearances, problems connected with environment clearances, a complete collapse of decision making at the executive level, not legislative, and this is both at the ministerial level and at the bureaucratic level. The budget cannot solve this. Of course, it needs to be solved. And which is why I have a little bit of disagreement with Swami, because if I want to be honest with the deficit numbers and I want to do everything that Swami wants me to do, I need a nominal GDP growth rate of 14.5%. I see absolutely no reason why growth rates will pick up and why I will get that 14.5% nominal GDP growth rate. If I nevertheless continue to estimate and project a 14.5% nominal GDP growth rate, lo and behold, when the revised estimates come along, I will discover that I have grossly underestimated the fiscal deficit.
Swami, the real question also at this point is the entire issue of subsidies. Yes, there has been an increase in the railway fares. There has been this deregulation of diesel and petrol prices. You're saying all of that will release money. But we do know that between 2008 and 2012, 4 years in a row, the subsidy to GDP percentage has been over 2% of GDP. And that's never happened more than 2 years in the last 4 decades before that. So how do you see Chidambaram addressing that issue of subsidy, or do you think it's automatically resolved with the railway fare hike and the diesel and oil decontrol that he's already affected?
Now we got two things happened. On the one hand, the international price, after having crashed in 2008, it went all the way down to 35 or 36. It steadily clawed its way up to $115 or so, which is the rate today. The second thing that happened was that the rupee, having at one time seemingly settled at 45 rupees to the dollar, went to 55 rupees to the dollar because of the apparent mismanagement of the economy. Both of those constituted a double whammy which sent up the rupee value of all oil imports. Chidambaram's aim is to tackle both those in one go. He cannot bring down the international price, but there is every sign that the international price is now leveling off, and in fact in the last few days it has recently fallen. But he is very clear that he does not want the rupee to depreciate further, that every 1 rupee depreciation of the rupee against the dollar means that much more of his oil subsidy. If against about 55 rupees he can bring down the exchange rate to about 52 or 53, that itself will wipe out 20,000-30,000 from the subsidy. So I said, Navika, you're quite right in saying between 2008 and 2012, because of rupee depreciation and rise in oil prices, all the budget estimates kept going haywire. But now with two things, one is deregulation, second, stopping the depreciation of the rupee. Those two acts together can finally bring the oil subsidy back to sanity, bring it down to no more than 40,000 crores.
Sorry, Navika, I want to come in on this. I do have one serious concern on the subsidy bill, and that's the fertilizer subsidy. I do believe, I agree with Swami, that I think the subsidy on petroleum and petroleum products, keeping aside kerosene, is going to come down, largely because crude oil prices have remained flat and it's tending to fall. But I do have a problem with with fertilizer subsidies, particularly imported urea. Because even if naphtha prices fall, it is very difficult in the political economy of the budget that you talked about in the beginning to increase farm gate prices of fertilizer. And you can't play the game from the beginning of the year of not giving the fertilizer ministry the checks to pay the companies that supply fertilizers, which is what is always done, by the way. The last 3 months of the year, fertilizer companies never get their money. So I am concerned about the fertilizer subsidy. If naphtha prices ease up considerably, Chidambaram will get a bonus. Otherwise, that one will bite.
Well, I just want to, listening to everyone, I get a sense that we're not thinking politically, I'm afraid. The number crunching may look all very good, but you ask any Congress politician, this is a pre-election year, and they are not going to wait for next year's budget. Some of our panelists are saying, we'll have this kind of budget this year, we'll prepare for another kind next year. I don't know whether the Congress party is taking such a long-term view. I'll take another short break. When I come back, we'll talk about that. What do the voting classes get? Back in a couple of minutes. Welcome back. Let's get into the politics of the budget now. What does the middle class get? What does the urban middle class get? What do the rural sections get? Is this a Chidambaram or Manmohan Singh budget or a Congress party budget? Meghnath Desai, why don't you open that debate for us? It has to be either this way or that. There can't be a balancing act.
One advantage of the petrol price hike and the diesel price hike is that Manmohan and Chidambaram can show to the Congress fellows that increasing price properly has given them a reduction in the outgoings, and that money may be available for the subsidies the Congress fellows like. So in a sense, there is a symbiosis between the hardliners who want to cut subsidies on certain items of middle class consumption and then subsidize where they think the Congress's poverty related vote is. So I think it may be that they may be able to reconcile these two things, because in a very interesting way, Rahul Gandhi at the Congress Chintan Shivir praised Manmohan Singh. That is the first time a leader praised Manmohan Singh's contribution. So I think there is a reconciliation in the two sides.
No, what does the...
And Chidambaram may just be able to convince them
who
that
gets...
not letting the rupee depreciate is a good thing.
That's all about who gets what. We're going to have to look at, sort of 800 million people who earn between 45,000 and 3.5 lakhs. Want to look at another 150 million? Who gets what? Because
don't give me fake numbers. Don't give me fake numbers.
No fake numbers.
The middle classes get cut in interest rate by the RBI if the deficit is under control, and the poor and the rural people get the subsidies. That's the reconciliation.
Swami. But Swami, do you think that over the last 2 or 3 years in the UPA 2, they frittered away the opportunity to tighten their belts in the last 2 years, and therefore there is less elbow room today for Manmohan Singh and Chidambaram to really come out with the Sops, because already there is such a big hangover of the fiscal deficit that they've frittered away their chances over the last 3 years?
Look, the fact is that we've had 2 years of sudden collapse of economic growth. Earlier you had economic growth of 8.4, now a revised figure of 9.2%. Then last year collapsed to 6.5, this year all the way down to 5. Second half of the year almost 4.5. Now, this has not been engineered by Manmohan or any particular set of policies. It is a consequence of a number of things, including political paralysis, lack of decision making, a coming together of the fact that, things on environmental, forest, tribal, land acquisition, a whole lot of projects got held up, combined with this scream against corruption. I mean, there has been so much crony capitalism in many of these kinds of projects. This combination has dragged down the growth rate of the economy, which then does two things. On the one hand, it widens the fiscal deficit and creates the problems that you've seen, including inflation. Inflation is a consequence of all these issues.
Who gets what?
Secondly, the fact that growth has slowed down means job opportunities of every kind, they have also come down.
So in this
situation, both are adverse. So the truth is, the way out, you need to re-incentivize growth, you need to re-incentivize decision making. We are seeing the decision making has started again since last September, October, and is going to go ahead.
But Swami,
they are taking the political risks of having converted themselves to a minority government by parting company with them.
Swami,
provided you can get the growth kick-started, you take care of this.
The problem is already too deep. My limited point is the problem is too deep. We are talking as if, we have a lot of time to respond. You have all surveys. Watch this. Omkar. All surveys are telling you the UPA is doing very badly. The perception of the UPA is bad. It has become completely scam-tainted. At this point of time, politically, the Congress party needs a whiff of fresh air. It really needs an injection. The diagnosis is bad. Who's getting what? If in this budget...
So, hang on. Here's a question to you. Here's a question to you and here's a question to the viewers. And think about this. Suppose Mr. Chidambaram were told by the powers to be, forget all the economics that you weren't taught, forget all the stuff that you knew. I want a totally populist budget. I don't care if the deficit is 10% of GDP. I want it, okay?
No, it's not good. That's a bit of an exaggeration.
You think that's going to help the Congress win more than 150 seats, if that?
The limited point I'm making to you. The limited point I'm making to you.
I'm making a limited point to you is that while I don't need to be a fiscal purist, I can take a much more careful fiscal position than Mr. Chidambaram's predecessor, who for 3 years of wanton splurging has got elected to the top of the hill, right?
There has to be some symbolism on the street. On the street, there will be a conversation.
Of course there will be.
No, there will be a conversation. Mujhe kya mila? So I want to ask you, who gets what?
So I'm telling you, the symbolism is not going to cost much on the budget. It may have an impact a little bit on the financial system. It may require banks to do some lending, but it is not going to have as much of an impact on the budget as we think.
Debroy, Mr. Debroy, if I could get you in at this point, the point really is there scope? What Arnab really wants to ask is there scope for a surcharge on the high-level income taxes? Is there scope for raising the tax rate for the middle classes and hand them over to the opposition party, the BJP, which is seen as the party for the middle? So surcharges, hike in tax rates for the middle classes. Are you seeing something of that sort?
Surcharges, Vivek Debroy, could be political suicide. You introduce surcharges at this point of time where the middle class is already alienated from the government. That will be political suicide.
Arnab, look, you asked who gets what. The right question to ask is who is perceived to get what. Because things like growth, recovery, things like inflation, I don't relate to immediately. So the important part is the perception. In addition to what has already been said about not adding much to budget numbers, I agree with that. But in addition to that, what you're going to get is a hike in the slabs. You will probably get, purely from that perceptional point of view, a surcharge for incomes in excess of, 12 lakhs or something like that. That's eminently possible. What you will also get, and I keep harping on the same point, that if you look at the track record of finance ministers since 1991, whenever they have been able to reduce the deficit, including Dr. Manmohan Singh as finance minister, they have done that by slashing capital expenditure. And therefore, that's exactly what Mr. Chidambaram is going to do. He's going to slash the capital expenditure, please the middle class, so-called middle class, by hiking the slabs, and also not doing anything about LPG subsidies, something that has not been mentioned so far. LPG subsidies are not going to be tinkered with. Kerosene is, of course, different, that's been mentioned, but LPG subsidies, we already know that the initial attempt at reforming that is not going to happen.
So this is not going to be a big bang budget in that sense. There's no big bang in this budget. There'll be a little bit of cosmetics, right? There's no big bang.
No.
Either in terms of economic big bang or political big bang. Meghna Desai, no big bang budget.
Well,
I'm sorry.
What they need right now is a steady as you go budget. They need a steady, no big bangs, steady as you go budget, because you never know, there might yet be another budget to come.
You're optimistic. Yes, Swami.
But there'll be, you may not call it a very big bang, but at least two reasonable bangs. One is going to be the Food Security Act, the other is going to be the direct cash transfers. I mean, we have not discussed that very much other than me, but this is going to be, this is going to be something that is going to be tomed again and again and again as something which can really be a game changer. Whether you can cover the whole country by May 2014, I think is very doubtful. But I think Chidambaram is determined that at least we started in these 50 districts. Actually, perhaps it's down to about 40 odd now. But in those 40 odd districts, if you can make a substantial impact, I think that will carry a message. So it is not that there's no bang at all. This is a bang. But I keep repeating, the biggest thing of all is not just a budget announcement, but what is the outcome 12 months down? The biggest, most important thing is if you get inflation down to 5.5–6% over a year, interest rates come down. If interest rates comes down, then the EMIs for all the housing loans comes down, the EMIs for all the scooter loans, for all the car loans, the middle class gets happy.
Absolutely.
Everybody is happy with lower inflation. The inflation, I think, is the most important thing. That, instead of focusing on a giveaway here and giveaway there, if a lower fiscal deficit means that you get foreign money flowing in, an appreciating rupee brings down inflation, that is the most important thing. It is the outcome of the budget 12 months now, rather than just the announcement on budget day, that will determine the electoral impact.
Omkar Goswami, if I can get you in at this time, the point really is, does the finance minister have the time to look at interest rates coming down over the next 3 to 6 month period, or is he looking for instant popularity because they're already started advertising about food on every plate? That's the food security bill, cash transfers, which even featured in the Chintan Shivir. So what is the time frame that we are looking at
here's what I think.
In the budget?
I think he's going to keep some allocation for food security, which he will cut from the food subsidy bill. Whatever he allocates for food security, he will cut from the food subsidy bill to that extent, and he will keep an allocation for Aadhaar, which he will also cut from other parts of the subsidy bill. He is expecting, and you've asked a very good question, he is expecting sooner or later 18th floor of the Reserve Bank to accommodate him and bring 2 quick 25 basis point cuts in the interest rate. He wants that to happen, and if it doesn't happen quickly enough, well, he's quite sure that by August it's bound to happen, because the current person sitting in the hot seat in the Reserve Bank will no longer be there. So he needs a lower interest rate. He needs to make, Navika, he has to make a sensible budget. He doesn't have to make a budget that makes each one of us jump in joy as economic purists. It has to be a sensible budget. Don't overspend. Try and bring the deficit down. Announce some Sops. You can always make expenditure heads halfway down the year. It's not a problem. You've got enough fluidity. Make it sensible. Tell people that you're serious about governing the country right, and also taking care of the exchequer, and have a body language that Chidambaram is very good at when he wishes to have it.
Well, that'd be very interesting, gentlemen. It's been fascinating having this chat because when you speak only in political circles, everyone talks about Big Bang. I think we've brought in a lot of perspective in this chat. What comes through to me, Navika, is that there is a need to look at the medium term, not just the short term, and to create an atmosphere of greater confidence, so that 3 to 8 months from now, the situation in the country's economy is stable, and on that basis, perhaps you make a pitch for the next general election.
That's right.
That's the sense I get.
That's right. Right now, we are sitting on a credit rating outlook of about BBB minus. If it goes down any further, we are going to become a junk rating country.
Can't risk that.
And that's not something that Chidambaram can risk at this point in time. So he's going to look at his numbers. He's going to look at his spending. But as we've gathered, that it's going to be sensible spending. It's going to have some of the names of the schemes. But at the same time, he's going to take care of not trying and alienating any single section of the society, whether it is the middle class or the rural class.
Yeah, but whenever you are presenting a pretty average dish, you garnish it fantastically to make it look spectacular. So I think I'd bet on great garnishing, superb cosmetics, a lot of names, and tremendous amount of symbolism.
Take a bet on how
in
many
the budget.
times is he going to quote the poet, quote various Tamil poets.
Thiruvallupar.
So I don't have any special qualification on that, but I'd be surprised if he doesn't. And not just that, I'd be surprised if many names don't crop up in different schemes that he may announce. How much those schemes are, how big they are, is anybody's guess. Gentlemen, it's been wonderful talking to you. I look forward to our next chat on Budget Day. Thank you very much from Navika and me for joining me on this pre-budget chat. Thank you.